Hey guys, Joe Bonamassa here. I hope you enjoy this KTBA Artist Spotlight from the legendary Papa Chubby.
No one's more amazed that I get to earn a living doing what I do, and I'm very, very happy and honored to be able to do it. I'm just a lucky cat who gets to play music for a living. It's really that simple, man. I happen to like to do a lot of things, so, I do play drums and some other instruments, but the guitar is my beast, man. This is what, it's all about the guitar for me. At the end of the day, this is the thing that lit me up and keeps me going and sustains me, so. At the end of the day, I'm a guitarist. How would I define my guitar style? I would say viscerally forgiving. I'm kind of clunky, man. I hear some of these other cats playing, I'm like, I can't do that. But then I get up there and I get lit up, like something happens, and you get in your zone. And when you're in the zone, you're not there. And it's the most beautiful feeling. It's like in meditation, they talk about finding the space between thoughts. And when you're playing guitar and you're in the zone, you're always in that space. You're never thinking, and the energy is flowing, and the ideas are flowing, and it's just like the best, like, cosmic state in the world, man. It's like you're absent. You really get to step away and let all these things carry through you, and hopefully you don't come back in and screw it all up, which I do all the time. So, growing up in the Bronx, my parents owned a candy store on 181st Street and Arthur Avenue. If you ever saw the film A Bronx Tale, that was my life. My dad was like a composite between the Chaz Bomentary and the Robert De Niro character. My dad was a tough Jew from the Bronx, man. He was involved in the boxing game. He was partners with Floyd Patterson, who was the heavyweight champion of the world. So I would spend my summers in Floyd's training camp in Marlboro, New York, which is amazing. The candy store had a jukebox. The jukebox had the top 10, and every week the guy would come and change the top 10, and when he did, he would give me the old records. So by the time I was 6 or 7, I had a massive 45 collection, and I'd basically sit around all day and listening to what was primarily Motown and Stax Volt and whatever was on the top 10, but most of it was R&B, man. From there, I moved to Flushing when my father died, and just took up the guitar when I couldn't play drums in the apartment I lived in. So I got an electric guitar. That didn't work out too well either. The first day I got my first amp, I remember what it was. It was a PV Classic 100, and it had a 6 10-inch cabinet. So there were 6 10-inch speakers, and my parents went to work, and the first thing I did was light up a big fat joint and put that song. It went to 12. It actually went to 12. I put the thing on 12 and I hit an E chord. Bang, 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 bang. It's The Police. Immediately. And that began a long history of people trying to tell me to shut up. And it didn't work, so here I am. I was in Flushing, Queens. I lived on Northern Boulevard and 149th Street. And when you look down Northern Boulevard, you could see the Empire State Building. And it just called to me. It was like a beacon. It was like, get out of this dead-end town where there's nothing happening. And it's just, all my friends are getting wrapped up in drugs and gangs and just bad stuff. And all I want to do is play music, man. So, the circumstances led me to being able to get an apartment in New York City, the only place I could afford to live. The reason Alphabet City became what it was economic. It was the only neighborhood that musicians and a lot of other people could live in at that time. So it facilitated a lot of cultural meshing, if you will, man. It was an amazing time to be there. I moved into the city, and in a week I was in like 5 bands and getting paid to play. Albeit sometimes $5, but at least I was making money playing music, man. And then a lot happened, man. You had the punk rockers moving in because they could afford to live there or squat in some of the abandoned buildings that were there. Then you had the people who had been there, all the Puerto Rican people who just lived there and like had lives and families who were trying to keep their kids off the streets and out of the bad stuff. And then you had the gentrification coming in all at the same time. So it was a clash beyond clashes, but that led to some really great music, man. on every level. At the time, there wasn't much of a blues scene in New York. There was a small blues scene, and you know, some of the people who were playing blues at that time were Jimmy Vivino, who's on The Boat. Other people like that, man, they were at the forefront of it, man. But you know, there was a big punk rock scene, and I got involved in that. And it was just tons of music of all different kinds and a great education, man. But I was there when the Voidoids first formed, and they were an amazing band with Bob Quine and Ivan Julian, two of the most unique guitar players ever. As a matter of fact, Jack White from the White Stripes just did they did a film directed by Jim Jarmusch, very famous director, about Jack White trying to remake the song Blank Generation. And they went into Electric Ladyland where they recorded the original version, and he couldn't figure out how to play the intro, so they called Ivan Julian, who had just recovered from his first bout with cancer, and came down to the studio to teach Jack how to play the riff on that song. It was such an amazing moment, man. And then they recovered the song. So besides Richard, the thing that really happened in that area, which redefined rock and roll as we know it, was the Bad Brains came to town. The Bad Brains were a black, hardcore punk rock band from Washington, D.C. And they were considered a threat to the youth of D.C., being black men who inspired white children to revolt against authority. They were banned from playing in D.C. So they came out with a song called Banned in D.C. No, you can't catch me. Why? I'm banned in D.C. And a gentleman named Jerry Williams, I always like to talk about the gone and not forgotten, man. And that's why I have Hubert Sumlin on my shirt, man. Hubert Sumlin is my archangel and one of my guiding lights, man. Jerry Williams was another one. He was the guy who brought the Bad Brains to New York from D.C. when they couldn't play in D.C. anymore, recorded their first record in a squat theater. He had a little recording studio in called 171 Avenue A, and history was made. That record with the lightning bolt striking the Capitol, the cover was done by a guy named Dave Parsons, who lived underneath the stage of, I'm not making this up, man. He had a record called Rat Cage, a label called Rat Cage Records, and he put out the first Beastie Boys record called Cookie Puss. Later on, Dave transitioned and became a woman, became Donna Lee Parsons. When he did the Beastie Boys, re-released that record and paid him 6 figures. So there was definitely a thing about taking care of the people who were there when you first started. And I'm a big fan of that, man. And that's a lot of what this cruise is about too, man. It's about keeping the heritage alive and keeping the music alive. So it's, I've been lucky enough to be at the forefront of a lot of musical scenes. Manny's Car Wash, man, was the blues mecca on the Upper East Side in the 90s. What happened was, man, I was doing gigs like that, like Richard Hell and all that. But the thing about those gigs is, like, you'd go on tour for like 3 weeks and you'd come back and there'd be nothing. You'd have no way to earn a living. So, and I love blues, man. I just love playing. I grew up with it. Like I said, blues and R&B. So me and a couple other cats said, let's start a blues band. And I started Popa Chubby, and we started playing gigs around town. And Manny's Car Wash at the time was the place to get a gig. It was booked by a gentleman named Buddy Fox. Gone but not forgotten. Buddy's still with us. He's 95 years old. He lives in Maui, Hawaii. Buddy gave everybody in New York their first gig, including Stevie Ray Vaughan, including Joe, probably. Buddy booked the Lone Star for years before he wound up at Manny's Car Wash. He was a rough customer. I call him up and try and get a gig, and he'd be like, no, you can't have a gig, can't play here. So finally, I got a gig at a bar around the corner, and I started packing him out every Wednesday, and I look up one day, and who's there? Buddy Fox. And he's like, if you want a gig at Manny's, you can't play here. I was like, Buddy, they give me a weekly gig here, man. He goes, well, the only one who gets a weekly gig at Manny's Car Wash is the guy who does the jam on Sundays. And I have somebody. And I said, fire him. And he did. And I got the jam at Manny's Car Wash, Manny's World Famous Blues Jam. That's what we named it, because it really was the stopping point for any touring act who was in town. would come by and sit in. And through Buddy, who wound up being my mentor, he also started using me for every blues act that came through town who needed a band. So I got to play with Earl King and Phil Guy, Buddy Guy's brother, and big time. I mean, just anybody could imagine. It was an education beyond educations. Such an amazing time and so much to learn, right? And it enabled me also to get the top musicians. So Mike Merritt, who's playing with me on this cruise, bass player, wound up being in my band back then. Then shortly after that, Mike got a call from Jimmy Vivino who said, I just got the gig on the Conan O'Brien show and I need a bass player. So Mike left me to do that, and then we reconnected for this cruise. 27 years later. It was a rough hiatus for everybody. 2 years, tours canceled. Some tours were canceled 3 or 4 times and rescheduled. This cruise was canceled twice, man. You know, I have no filter. So if you leave me with a camera and my own desires, everything is gonna come out. So, and it did during the pandemic. Every little bit of insanity, every little bit of hopefully brilliance, it all came out, man. So hopefully this leaves you with a better grasp of what's important in life, you know, and it definitely did that for me. I mean, I've really reassessed my priorities. I mean, you know, as far as we know, this is a finite journey, you know, so we tend to invest in a lot of things that really don't matter. And I think I'm not doing that as much anymore. I think I'm trying to invest in what's real. And I plan on trying to carry that forward. Here's the thing, man. We spend our whole lives chasing money, you know, and then we die and we lose it all. So, you know, look, I've worked for almost 40 years, 35 years, man. I'm luckier than a lot of artists are. You know, I was smart. I didn't squander what I earned. I saved a little bit. You know, I'm in a good position. But a lot of cats my age aren't in this business. And that's also where I give Joe credit. He's really helping a lot of people in this business. Like Larry McCray, man. Larry McCray, I always said, was the heir to Freddie King. He's so good, man. I don't think there's anybody stronger than Larry McCray, but no one's heard anything from him in years. And now he's got a new record out with Joe, which will get him a lot of attention. Eric Gale, same thing, man. Joe Anaconda, same thing. So it's really great to see somebody with the wherewithal actually investing. So look, let's face it, Joe doesn't have to do that. He's doing it because he sees something in these people that he thinks needs to be heard. And I think that's a beautiful thing. That's real. You know, that's what's real, man. People, music, and love. There's a heritage in this music. There was a heritage of bringing young players up, which I always try and do when I hear somebody of merit to really give them a chance to be heard. And there was a heritage of history in this music and of keeping the music moving forward, always, man. I was a big fan of Willie Dixon's. Willie Dixon was the godfather of the blues. He invented the blues and probably a lot of rock and roll. And that was a big thing, man. You know, the blues have a foundation that he started just to keep the music in the forefront and to keep it in people's minds and to keep it going forward because it's an important force. And that's what we want to do. Looking back over the years, I'd have to say my proudest accomplishment is longevity. I'm still here. I'm still doing this. I'm still vital. I was able to pack out the Stardust Theater the other night. And I'm really grateful for that, man. I mean, I must be doing something people like, giving people something they need. And that's the biggest accomplishment you can make in this life is to move one soul, to help one other human being. So I think I've done a lot of that. So I plan on doing more.